welcome to Extraordinary Women in Tech Diamond Interviews, where we celebrate visionary leaders, women that are redefining leadership, innovation, and impact on the technology world. I'm your host, Juliana, and today I have a pleasure of having Jacqueline with me. She and I met in Paris, and she is an extraordinary leader, and I'm super excited to spotlight her story. Hi, Jacqueline. How are you?
Hi, Juliana. Thank you so much for the kind introduction. So I'm doing fine. I'm very excited about this interview, so looking forward to our discussion.
Absolutely. So a little bit about Jacqueline. Jacqueline is the IT director for pharma large markets at Roche. She is a recognized leader with over 17 years of experience driving digital transformation in healthcare and empowering teams with a global scale, multicultural environments. She's deeply passionate about AI, inclusive AI, data, and using technology to create meaningful change for patients and communities. Did I say everything right, Jacqueline?
That's perfect. That's excellent. That's perfect.
Wonderful. And I think I want to dive a first question about your leadership and growth. You've led major digital transformation across France, Middle East, and Western Europe, which are such different environments. What has been your biggest personal growth moment as a leader, driving transformation in such diverse geographies?
So I think I could say that the first thing was the realization that the data transformation, it's probably 10% about technology and 90% about cultural shift and adoption. Early in my career, so I was really driving the plan, making sure that everything was going as expected and pushing forward regardless of cultural barriers or different types of addressing the problems. So with the experience, so I realized that one size fits all, it just doesn't work. That we really need to make sure that we adapt to environment where we are. So as you said, I've been working in different cultures. So if I look at France, so we have a very consensus-driven culture, and then we have a culture as well that it is very, I would say, following the rules and following the compliance, following the law. While we work with areas like the Middle East, is very different actually. So they don't have the same limitations in terms of regulation as we have in France. So there is a culture that it is more driven by innovation. So there is a fast pace, and then there is a different way as well of adopting the technology. So what I have done is basically I needed to adapt to different cultures and the ways of operating and try to understand what success looks like in each of these cultures. And then empower the teams to make sure that they drive the execution. So, and this is more on the servant leadership side. So I think I have been switching throughout my career from a hierarchical way of leading to a more servant leadership where I drive the vision, I set the vision, and I let the teams on the ground to drive the execution. So I think this is the major growth that I have in terms of leadership while leading a data transformation across different geographies and different cultures.
No, it's beautiful, Jacqueline. And I wanted to step back and ask you, where are you coming from and living in Paris? How does that culture really, how did you adopt the first, even being in a different country, learning French? Just tell us a little bit about you.
Well, actually, I was born in Cuba.
Okay.
And I did all my studies in Cuba, so the university, and my first job was in Cuba as well. So I'm coming from a Latin culture, which I would say is very flexible. So I came to Europe when I was very young, actually, and my second job was already in Europe. But I didn't come to Paris directly. So I came to Belgium, and then in Belgium I had, I was speaking French as well. So I learned French when I was in Cuba. So my first job was in a neuroscience center, and then to get a degree or a grade, actually, an academic level, so you need to speak two languages on top of Spanish. So I took courses of French, and then I was able to speak English at the time as well. So my first experience with French was in Cuba, but of course, you don't practice it. When I came to Belgium, so I was living in Brussels, so I had to speak French. And then my kids were born in French, so this was the complete shift, because then you have no option than to speak French. And then when I came to Paris, I was speaking rather good French. With that said, The way of speaking is different actually between Belgium and France in general. So it took me a while to adapt to the speed, to adapt to the language, to adapt to a culture, because the expressions are not exactly the same. The language is the same, of course, but the speed of the speed that people speak in Paris is not even close to the speed that people will speak French in Belgium. So it took me a while to adapt. And then one of the funny stories is in the beginning of the career in Paris. So I struggled to speak in meetings. So when there were many people, so I was struggling to speak in meetings because in a more Nordic culture, so people will raise their hands and then they wait till one person finishes speaking to start again. This is not what happens in Latin cultures. So everybody speaks on top of everybody. So you need to find your place. And this was an adjustment that I was not really expecting. I was able to speak the language, but I need to adapt culturally to the way of operating in France.
Yes, I'm hearing that your adoption to culture started with yourself and your own culture and moving from Cuba and being in Belgium, and you've learned so much on the personal side, right? And then you were thrown into this global operation where you also had to learn the very different Middle Eastern culture as well. That's amazing. And talking about innovation and impact, I know that you've built career around using technology to enable better healthcare and patient experience. What is one project or innovation that you're most proud of, and what impact did you have on people's lives?
So the projects that I really prefer are the ones that we have a direct impact to a patient. And there are a few. I have done a few in my career. So one of the first projects that I did, and it is one of the ones that I remember the most, and it was a huge innovation. So it was a few years ago, and the project was about digitalizing the early access programs for patients. So this was a manual process completely, where we needed the patients, for example, that need the medication with urgency because of it had an advanced disease, or it was a compassionate use, that there were no other options and the patient need the medication urgently. There was a manual process driven by faxes, driven by emails, approvals, manual approvals. So this was taking weeks for a patient that it was in real need to get the medication. So we digitalized this process and we managed to get the full approval in 2 days. So this was a huge change in the way we were driving the early access programs. And this was a huge benefit for the patients as well, because it means that they could get the medication almost immediately compared to waiting for weeks. That sometimes we don't realize it, but for a patient that it is in a last stage of cancer or there are no other therapeutic options, 3 weeks is a huge amount of time.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that sounds amazing. And thinking about now just tying it into the future of AI, and you are probably working also with a global organization. What are you seeing in terms of AI really improving, patients' experience and business in general and healthcare? Maybe what obstacles or failures you've already seen, and where do you see the biggest improvement in patient care with that?
So there is a huge opportunity with AI, and we are trying to capitalize on that. So there are opportunities in the whole patient journey, actually. So if you look from the diagnostics, if you start from prevention, there are already quite a few things that can help the patient in the preventive care. Then we have diagnostics. We have a lot of things in diagnostics. I'm gonna talk a little bit more about that. Then we have as well AI that can support the patient, so that can identify what it is the best treatment for the patient. And then we have AI that can help us to follow up the patient in an optimal way. So, for example, if you look at diagnostics, today we are able to diagnose cancers with AI. So, for example, breast cancer, based on mammographies, So today, the AI is able to detect if there is a possibility of a cancer with a very high accuracy. So, and this is one of the areas that we have been deploying widely at Roche in collaboration with different countries, actually, because this is in collaboration with the health system of every country. So we don't own the solution, so we have a strategic collaboration with Microsoft, and then we help the implementation of the solution in different countries. Now we have all solutions that are developed by Roche that are also in the diagnostics space that will basically detect the tissue, for example. So when we have a nodule, so we can take a tissue, and then in this tissue, the test, we can detect if there are cancerous cells. So these are a couple of examples. Now, you asked as well about what are the challenges. And so there are a few challenges. So one of the big challenges is the adoption of these technologies, because the confidence is not that high. So for example, when these technologies get into clinical practice, the physician needs to adopt the technologies. And sometimes they see it as a threat. Sometimes they don't rely on the model, so that they don't have the confidence that the model is going to do a good job. So this is in the case of a radiologist, but I think little by little, so that they are understanding as well the benefits that the technology can have and how it can complement the clinical practice. Another challenge that we have is the inclusivity as well. For example, if we think of clinical trials, so we need to have populations that are representative in clinical trials. So today, sometimes it is hard to achieve, because if you have a rare disease, for example, the populations that have this rare disease are not very big. Now, AI can become a solution for these challenges. So one of the areas that we are as well working at Roche is how do we create synthetic arms for clinical trials. For example, when we do a clinical trial, so basically we have a group that is going to receive the medication, a group of patients that is going to receive the medication, another group that it is a control group that is going to receive a placebo. And then this control group, sometimes it is very difficult to get, and sometimes there are ethical considerations as well to put in place this control group. So we could replace these control groups with data that it is generated by AI. And this data, so it will include a diverse population. So this data can be generated based on historical records. And I think this is one of the areas where we don't speak that much, but AI is really a potential solution for the future.
No, it's so beautiful, Jacqueline. I think healthcare, preventative care, and also clinical trials where we had a lot of limitations, now giving us a lot of momentum where we don't have to struggle and get the late news that it's way too late, but actually be preventative. I think it's phenomenal to see how you guys are trying to really adapt it. Going back to your leadership style, you mentioned earlier that you have the servant leadership approach to cultures. How do you really create a culture with that empowers teams to innovate and embrace change in the digital transformation world?
And that's a very interesting question, because it's not that easy actually. So I think what it is important is to create a culture where basically people feel the psychological safety to experiment, and it is okay to fail. And then we try to understand more of what are the learnings rather than focusing on the failure. So I think creating this culture is not that simple, but little by little you can start modeling the behaviors that you expect your teams to have. One of the areas that I think it is important as well is to be clear on what is this area where we can experiment, and where is the area where we absolutely need to execute? Because we cannot be experimenting everywhere, so that there is a place for experimentation and there is a place for execution. So being clear on what are these areas, I think it is very important for the teams. And then you need to model certain behaviors. So one of the behaviors that I try to model is to be very open about when I make mistakes. So to recognize that I made mistakes and what did I learn, and things that I should have been doing differently. So I'm very open with the teams to say, okay, it was not the best way to do it. Probably I should have done it differently. So this type of behaviors, the team start understanding that they also can make mistakes, and it is okay to make mistakes. Another of the areas that I could say is that we need to be very clear on what we are learning actually. So it's not about celebrating the failure, but it is celebrating the learnings, because the more we experiment, the more we learn. And then the things that are good, as well as the things that are bad. So these are all big learnings. And I think in life, we all have huge learnings. And then in the professional life, this is as important as in your personal life. And the last thing that I would say is that I try to empower the teams to experiment, but with a clear objective. So why do we need to experiment? Why? What's the direction? What do we need to prove actually? And I think this clarity will help the teams to experiment in the right way and then present the results as well in the right way. So without the fear of this didn't go well.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful. I think what you're saying is you being courageous. I think this is very hard for a leader to actually recognize the mistakes, but also her own mistakes and share it with the team. But you go further to celebrate the learnings, because people, I think, they just try to brush it off and go to the next phase. And I think also that talks about you being servant leader, but also being positive about the learnings. And that's a huge step. And now, since we're talking about servant leadership, and I would like to go into the women leadership, right? As a woman leading, large scale technology organizations, there were probably challenges. So if you can share one challenge that you had to overcome, and maybe an advice to a woman who is trying to go to the next level in the leadership roles and they're facing some obstacles.
So one of the typical challenges, and I have that women have, and I've had it several times, is the imposter syndrome. So am I the right person for this job? Should I apply? Do I tick all the boxes? So I know that there are many people competing for this, for example, for your next role or for this position. I'm not so sure that I'm the right person to do that. So this imposter syndrome comes and goes, and it is a constant actually. So I'm not sure if we are built with that, but but certainly there are ways to overcome it actually. And so this is one of the areas. The other thing that I have faced quite a lot is being the only woman in the room. So the technology space is very male driven. And then even today, sometimes I'm the only woman in the room. And sometimes you feel like threatened or scared. Are you at the same level? Should you behave in the same way as your male colleagues? And then what I have realized is that probably you bring a perspective that it is not the same. So this is one of the assets that we have. When you start talking to them, so basically you are as qualified as they are. So you are no less. And I think you need to have the confidence to be at the table, to own the conversation, to express your opinions, and then sometimes to fight for what you think it is right. So for the next generation of women leaders, what I could say is that do not try to change yourself. So look at what's your secret weapon, and your secret weapon can be potentially empathy that not everybody has. It can be a different perspective. It can be the ability to create consensus or to bring people together. So you don't need to change yourself. You just need to find your own secret sauce to be able to be in these tables and to have the right confidence. You need to have people that support you as well. So you need to have sponsors. You need to have mentors. I think that this will help getting this confidence, and then having people that advocate for you as well when you are not there. So having this network of supporters is quite critical for any leader. And then I would say it's very critical for women leaders. And then ultimately, you have a responsibility. So as a leader, you have a responsibility to bring people in this journey, to bring other women in this journey. So I feel really responsible for supporting younger talent, supporting women, making sure that I make time for mentoring and coaching women that want to grow into a technology space.
No, and I felt it, Jacqueline, from the first time we met, and that's why I'm really honored to give you an award of EWIT 2025 for your courageous leadership, and also trying to really not fitting in and being a great example of how women leader can bring a different perspective, right? I feel that in today's tech world, there's two camps of women. Women that are trying to fit in and feeling that they're victim because they're only one person in the room. And there's the other side where they feel empowered because they are the only woman in the room. And having more women that own their power, that identify their voice, and being able to build and bring the different perspective. That's exactly what you're saying. Find allies and people to recognize your superpowers where they are there when you're not in the room, and really bringing you into the table. So I just wanted to thank you for your courage and the way you lead, and seeing all your progressions and travels, and actually the global scale coming from your personal journey, right? How you adapt with a different country, different people, and becoming a servant leader. That's a really beautiful story. So thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Uli.
And I'm looking forward to see you in Paris very soon.
Yes, I'm looking forward as well to see you in December.
Yes, see you soon, and thank you for being.
Thank you so much. Have a very nice day, and have a nice weekend as well.